Welcome back. Hi, anyone joining for the first time? Well, very welcome. So this is part 2, but they are pretty much self-standing. So we're going to be talking now about the methods and tools for integrating effective methods from all the pieces we pulled together from history in the last one, to look at prevention, early recognition, treatment, and a continuum of care for youth, their families, and communities. And then in our third segment, we're going to be actually working with the model to see how each of you can pull what you want to pull together for your own community. So we'll use our community intervention model in the third section. Okay, so techniques, methods, challenges, and solutions. And we do encourage some discussion. If it gets to be too much, we will ask you to hold for the break. And we'll have a 15-minute break in an hour. So, what we'd like to do now is select methods that you identify from your own practice. For those of you who weren't in the last session, just the methods you use in your own practice. You're going to discuss combining the knowledge and skills available to you to help adolescents, young adults, and their families and communities work together to facilitate resilience and improve outcomes. So we're going to provide you with a problem, and you're going to break into small groups and discuss what you're bringing from your own practice, and for those of you who were in the last session, things that you got from the last session. So just to get us started, our definition of youth, family, and community resilience. Resilience can be seen as the capacity, hope, and faith to withstand major trauma and loss, overcome adversity, and to prevail, usually with increased resources, competence, and connectedness. We see the individual as the integral unit of the family, and the family as the integral unit of community. So resilience is dependent upon health and resilience of both individuals and families in the community to build that whole larger system. And we're heavily influenced by Ubuntu. I grew up in South Africa, and Ubuntu is a word in the Nguni language. And Ubuntu is defined by a person's relations with other people. I am because you are. Without you, I am not a person. Ubuntu refers to behaving well towards others or acting in ways that benefit the community. A person who behaves these ways has Ubuntu. He or she is a full person. And this is the principle that underlines our work with communities and with individuals and families. So this is a situation in Romania some time back. The case study, our first case study, we're going to be playing with several through this time and the next. The problem focus, we were called in because adolescents in this community were struggling with serious substance use, and there had been a large number of deaths in recent times. What are your initial assumptions, hypotheses? What tools would you use for assessment? What information do you need about the adolescents, the families, the community? What interventions or methods would you use? And who would you involve in whatever treatment or intervention you choose to use? So I'll go back to that, but what we'd like to do is have you divide into small groups. You can turn your chairs around to make groups. And please have a reporter with you. And I would say groups of no more than 4 to 5. If you want to do it in couples, that's fine. We're not going to be controlling. Share current and historic strengths, themes, customs, and methods that you have found effective in working in your own setting, whether it's a practice, a treatment center, a healthcare center, that might be applicable to this Romanian community that we're looking at. Discuss how you and other members of your little discussion group might combine and use the methods you've identified, and then identify areas of potential change and integration if you were all to work together on this problem. Yeah. The picture? Or that? Picture?
Yeah, to emphasize the stark differences.
Okay, not now. So, Gale is wanting me to ask you which community you think the problems are in. Yeah, but this particular, the community that had called us was this one. Yeah. Okay. Small groups, about 10 minutes. And if you want to turn chairs around, form circles, we're fine with however you want to do it. We're here as consultants if you have questions.
Excuse me for 1 minute. I want to give you another piece of information and see how it informs your thinking. These are the railroad tracks that run through the town that you saw in the picture. All of the resources are on that side of the tracks. So the shift you saw between the very poor and the very rich, this area, in order to get to resources, the children had to cross the tracks and they were being killed by the trains. That's your...
So think about schools, shops,
groceries.
Groceries, doctors, everything
Was
is on this side of
the
the tracks. And the only resources on the other side of the tracks are the drug dealers. So back to work.
Go back to that other slide. Do you want this one up or the other slide? Okay. But think about that, add that into your thinking.
Okay. Are we ready? Ting, 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 ting. Okay, so let's have the reporters up here. I need you to be using the microphone. And can we have a reporter from each group, please, to come up? And this is the microphone for the discussion, and if you can share with us what each group came up with, and then afterwards we'll tell you what happened in that community. Wonderful. You want to start?
Hello. Well, after we understood about the tracks and things, we were a bit late in getting there. But we thought, obviously, finding out people in the community and trying to connect one side with the other so that we can get people that haven't got the resources that they need to speak to the people that have got the resources they need and find some safe passage for them to get from A to B. So that was kind of our last part of our conversation. But we did do a bit of an around thing around trust and building trust. And if you're working with the communities, trust is going to be a big thing. Facilitating it, understanding the existing knowledge, who knows what, how you can build on that. Because unless you know with what you're working with, it's really hard to then move forward.
Perfect. Thank you.
I don't claim to be a reporter, so bear with me. So we looked at it, and initially our question was, well, what was the event that had led to that? In terms of the adolescents, had they lost family members? Had they then got a family network? Had there been deaths related to their parents within that incident that took place then? Looking then at what is the issue around drug and alcohol use? What is that substance misuse problem? What is that looking at? Is that dealing with trauma? Is it something that was there historically that's then there's been a rise? Has the risk of use increased? Has the method of drug use changed to deal with the trauma that's been witnessed? What's the age? What's the demographic? Are the siblings affected within that area, or is it just individual young people? Are they marginalised groups within that area? Is there issues around cognitive functioning, educational levels?
And yes to all of that.
Tick. Is there educational low levels of educational attainment in that area? Are they from marginalised groups in terms of from the Romanian culture? Is there also exploitation of young people within that demographic because of the increased use of drug dealers, and that's how the train tracks to the opposite side? And then it was about bringing the police together, making sure the police do what they do, the churches, talking to the drug dealers, working with the shop owners and the schools, but also working with the travel companies and the railway operators to say, is there an alternative route? So when we're working, is there ways that we can deviate risk? And
wonderful. Terrific. Yeah, these are just fabulous, both of you.
Okay, we're lucky we have somebody in our group that has local experience of Romania.
Of Romania. Wonderful.
So, one is, which has been said before just now, around working in particular with an excluded group, how you get access to that group and how within that group they can begin to develop their own strategies for dealing with the problems. We initially, before we found out about the train tracks, wanted to know an awful lot more about the issues that were affecting these people. So the rest is more or less the same as everybody else.
Wonderful. Thank you. Great to have a local resource. Yes.
I am not the best reporter in the group, but they scapegoated me.
Which means you're the best.
Okay.
That makes you the best automatically.
Okay. Actually, this is one very good example. Thank you so much for this example, that mental health professional is not to treat individual. It's to treat community and to treat nations, not only communities. Yeah. This is very striking example. It hits me. I have personal issues with it, but anyway, I would go to the highest authority in this place and tell him and try to gang with him as a group, so that we have to reach the person, the family, the community, the NGO, even the local authority. I will try to convince them that you will never live safe while you have such neighborhood next to you. If you want to live safe, if you want your son as a mayor or an authority to be drug-free, you have to help this community. Otherwise, it will be infectious to you. You will be the first victim of it. So if you can collaborate with me, with my team, with my group, we can help to create effective communication.
Wonderful.
Between the two sides of the railway, and instead of them sending to you drugs and the crimes and the terrorism, they will send you cooperation, appreciation, and love.
Perfect.
And this is what's happening in Gaza now. I hope Gaza will be the same.
Thank you. Well said.
I'll just pick out two things that we thought about. One was about attachments and where the young people, who they are forming attachments with, if they have sort of healthy family setups, and what kind of a community they have and how they support each other. And if there is a lack of those healthy attachments, is there perhaps gang culture, and is that where they find their security and their attachments? And then another one about narratives and the narrative of the community? What's their story
Yes.
that they tell about themselves, or what they believe about
Wonderful.
themselves? Is it something that's always been that way for as long as they can remember, and it just becomes part of, well, this is just
Yes.
how it is, this is just
Yeah,
what we do,
it's so important.
and no kind of window out of it?
Yeah.
That's it.
Thank you. Great job, everybody. Yes. Yes, one more. Wonderful.
We worked
This is
as a
incredible.
couple, and mostly we were covering some of the things that have already been said, trust being a big one. The one thing that I brought to the table, having worked with organizations around team communication, that some way of facilitating the conversation amongst the helpers, right?
Yes.
To keep that conversation open and creative and generative.
Great.
Okay.
This was amazing, guys. Well done. So let me just complete the story. In the next group, we're going to be playing with linked community resilience, which was the model I introduced you to at the end of the last session. What we did was we held a major community meeting with both sides of the tracks. We brought in the community from the disadvantaged side and from the other side, and what they came up with as a solution matches everything that you all talked about. They came up with a delegation to go to the government to ask for a bridge to be built. They also, which was amazing, it happened, took a couple of years, but it happened. They also realized that their children were at school together and that they were completely divided into two factions. And the families on each side agreed to sponsor a friendship with someone from the other side of the tracks. So the families, and what happened was over the period of the next few months, while I was going backwards and forwards to Romania, the families, not only did the kids become friends staying overnight, but the families became friends. And the community then really did everything that you've all spoken about once they had come together as one community. So that was beautiful. Thank you all. Thank you.
So Judith went through this, but just again, this was from fear to understanding to access resilience. They did this work. They created linkages in the community. They developed a focus. They decided who were the best linkages to work, and they had a goal and partnered to make that happen. I'm sorry?
There were no child deaths in the next year, none at all. So they'd achieved their goal.
Again, building on the strength of community, and in the last session we talked about the philosophy of Ubuntu. It builds on building on the intrinsic resilience, strengths, and resources of everyone, the extended network, in order to solve problems. It draws on members of the natural support system to form a network committed to helping the community. And professionals coach links to extend resources. So once a link is identified in a community as being a natural, let's say, resource or leader in that community, they're a natural change agent. They're coached to be able to do that work and what that involves.
Okay.
Yeah. Ooh. Apparently we can't come too close together.
I just was curious how you started in terms of identifying.
We're going to go through the whole process,
Yeah.
and you're actually going to do it together in the next meeting. So, and we're going to go through the whole link community resilience process. So,
You start.
okay. So what we do is basically a 3-stage process, which empowers the community, and our goal, of course, is reducing long-term professional involvement. Again, our philosophy is treading lightly, leaving no footprints, and leaving the community in charge. Our first stage is bringing everybody together, and you covered most of this. In fact, you covered all of this in your groups, which was really exciting for us. The community comes together to share their long-term history. So in the same way as we do with families, where we share an intergenerational history, here we share the history of the community, which includes political things, conflicts, floods, famines, anything that has happened in that area. And also includes, have there been refugees in, have there been refugees out, what is the social situation, are there communities that have more and those that have less. Their traditions, because tradition is, in the same way as we talked about the importance of connectedness to family and to culture, tradition is culture. Have people lost their culture? Have they lost their traditions? How are they maintaining them? And then the current situation, which is often when we're called in, is often a traumatic event, an increase in problems, mass disaster, a famine, a flood. Japan was the nuclear disaster, Australia was the brush fires, and so on. In the meeting, once they've shared their story, their traditions, we guide the community to select community links who are natural change agents. And we have a very formal procedure to do that, because very often people will wave their hands and say, I'm the link, I have influence. So part of the procedure is to make sure that we don't have what we call spurious links. People who claim to be connected but aren't really. They're just the ones who, the busybodies or the people who assume power. Links often aren't powerful. They're the ones who are most connected to the largest number of people in that community, that can cross the borders in the community without getting caught in one or other coalition. Okay? And once we have helped the community select links, we then coach them to establish clear goals. And those goals need to be the primary goals established by the community. We're working now in small groups as we were here. And you all came up with looking at what were the goals and how were you going to achieve them, right? Once we have the goals, we work with them to prioritize the goals, and we will often start with the easiest goal so that they're able to do things effectively rather than trying to establish, to work on the most challenging goal first. And then we turn that goal into small workable tasks, and they divide into work groups that are then coordinated by the links and supported by us as long as we're involved. Often people will come up with a goal of, we want the community to be happy, right? Well, what does that look? What would happiness in this community look like? What are the details? What do we need to do to get there? And once the community the links are working, the community groups are working, we then withdraw as outside professionals, but remain available. So, for example, in Argentina, I went back. I lived there for long enough to get this all to happen. It's a large country. And went back initially every 6 months, then every year, then every 2 years, and then every 5 years, 5 years. So we provide the process. One of the challenges is that very often funding bodies believe that the only way to have a project or a method that will be translatable, replicable with the same results is to have formal content. Well, content doesn't translate from one culture to another. The only thing that translates from one community to another, one culture, one country to another is process. The content has to belong to the local people. And so we provide a process, the community generates the content and the goals that relate directly to what they want to achieve. They then turn those goals into realistic tasks and practical projects, building on existing resources, which is what you all did so beautifully. The less the professionals do, the more successful the program and community. Very similarly to what we do in how many of you are therapists? Okay? And you know in therapy that when we pull our chair back and let the clients do the work, it's far more effective than when we're telling them what to do. Right? Very similar. We tread lightly, leaving no footprints, while the community takes credit for change.
Okay.
Questions, comments? All clear at the moment? Great.
Okay, so we're going to look at another case study. We have a 24-year-old arrested for driving under the influence. And one of the tools that we use are genograms. And which basically, if anyone hasn't worked with a genogram, it's a map of the family going back at least 3 to 5 generations.
Has anyone not used a genogram?
We have at least one.
Okay.
So I'll go through it quickly. It identifies family members, family patterns, who in the family has struggled, family themes, who plays what role, which relationships are healthy or strained, and what are the transitions, deaths, divorces, trauma, migration, job loss, birth, marriages, adoptions, etc. It's basically, for people who haven't worked with it, I recommend it. It is basically a family tree with information. So this is a genogram of our friend Roy, who is 24 years old, was arrested for a DWI.
Driving while under the influence.
Driving while under the influence. He started his first cannabis use at age 13 and began drinking at age 15. His parents are Ty and Mary.
No.
They divorced.
No, Michelle and
Oh,
Josh. Michelle and Josh are his parents.
Oh, sorry, I went one out. Michelle and Josh are his parents. And he has a decent relationship with his mother and a closer relationship perhaps with his father. He resided with his mother after the divorce. And so we know Dad is in recovery. So Red is an addiction or substance use disorder. Half red, half white means the person is in recovery. He was 6 years old when his brother died, and he's had no treatment but hasn't drunk in 10 years. Mom Michelle is close with her mother, has a alcoholic, again, father, had a brother who was stillborn. So we see alcohol and other things in the family system. You want to add?
Yeah. What else do you notice on this genogram? I want them to do. Oh, okay. Can you read it from there? Okay. What else do you see? Parents are now with other partners after the divorce. Yes. Yes. And what do you think the substance abuse is? What do you think started that substance abuse? Co-teach. You can co-teach.
Yeah.
Trauma. What was the trauma? Death and loss. Right? Loss of a loved one,
yes.
Absolutely.
In one family, a car accident, the other a stillborn child.
So what happened with Josh, he was 6 when Terry was 3, and Josh had been asked by his mom to watch Terry for a little bit while she ran into the kitchen, and Terry ran into the road and was killed. Right? And from that time, Dad started drinking, Mom got seriously depressed. Okay, what else do you notice?
He was engaged and now he's not.
Right,
And he also had
because of the drinking, right? Okay. What do you think? He has 2 siblings, Colleen age 22 and Greg age 13. Good. So who would you bring in?
All of
All of them. Great. Terrific.
Right.
Terrific.
We're going to involve all of them. Okay. Given the information you have about Roy and his family, what might you try that you have never done before? Who would you involve? With whom might you partner from the professional community and from the natural support system?
Get back into your groups with a reporter. Where you let's have very quick reporting. We can't. So this is, I know, I wanted the reporting first. Don't preempt me.
Oh, okay.
Very quick reporting. Who are you involving? Who's your group involving?
They would need to come up, Judith.
Let's just have everybody shout out. Who are you involving from the professional community? Anyone? Probation. Terrific. Yes, his GP, his primary care provider. Perfect. AA. Wonderful. His sponsor, if there is one. Yes. The youth worker. Perfect. Family support, natural support community would be his sponsor, his family, his coach if he's been involved in any sports. Perfect. And in the family, you already said everybody in the family. You've got a wonderful team. And then what we do is we get to look at whether this pattern of loss and trauma goes back any further. And typically, we like to do at least 5 generations, which when you watch the TED Talk, it's a study I did over 35 years, collecting families of 5 to 7 generations struggling with addiction, to look at patterns going across time. So a lot of people don't know, but we can also hypothesize according, when we're thinking community, we can hypothesize according to where did they come from, where were they living, what was going on in that community. All the things you've talked about, traditions, culture, heritage. Often it's not the detail about the family, but getting a sense of what they might have lived through. So just some additional clinical tools. Most of you were with me already for the life spiral, so I'm not going to repeat that. But what we do know is during stress, family roles become confused. So this is the transitional checkerboard. What happens in families is what happens in nature. Nature abhors a vacuum. If there's somebody missing, somebody moves in. So what we see here is in the old days we had all the grandparents, paternal grandfather and mother, maternal grandfather and mother, husband, wife, who also have father and mother, or let's say just spouses, and then the siblings. And the dashed lines are because secrets tend to permeate only through one or two levels. Big secrets go all the way through and are still thought to be secrets but aren't. Okay? So what happens today is, in the old days, if one or other of the spouses was missing, a grandparent might come in to help fix the stove or take care of the children. Right? Now we're living in a situation in many countries and cultures where the extended family is not available anymore. And what happens is that when one, and it could be either spouse, when one or other spouse is missing, one of the kids comes up to help. And it's very normal. How many of you at some point were asked by a parent, please help with something? You know, I'm going to be missing, or I'm going to, right? And what we see, for example, in Roy's family, Mom did something very normal. Can you just watch little one for a minute? And then we have that loss, and when we look at the 5-generation genogram, that loss is being repeated, and we have a legacy of loss in that family that reverberates as a pattern where people become addicted to deal with trauma and untimely loss. So what happens here is one of the kids comes up, and it could be any of them, and when that little one is saying, hey, do something, and bossing the siblings around, we start seeing sibling conflict. If the absence of mom or dad is extended through time, that kid may move up to the next level. This is a normal family. Nothing happening, except that dad or mom is working hard, going away, traveling, and let's say that absence is extended. This little one might actually be keeping mom company and becoming a confidant because dad is away or mom is away, so confidant to dad. And if that absence is extended or there's death, that little one might even move up to grandparent level, taking care of the parent.
Interestingly, we see that a lot in military families and first responder families, emergency workers for catastrophes, things like that, where they're gone for months or at a time or a year
or
at a time.
CEOs.
Or CEOs, yeah.
And people who are, the old traveling salesman who came home on weekends. Not anymore. When people are flying all over the world, they're not home, and the kids tend to move up. Now, if that absence is extended, what happens to a child who tries to parent? They're not trained. They haven't had a role model. So they tend to hit their siblings. They tend to parent unpredictably and often with violence. And then we get the beginning of adaptive behavior, which could be addiction, depression, anxiety, trying to do something and feeling bad about themselves. So that little one, whichever it is, stepping up across hierarchies is tremendously at risk, as you mentioned, for addiction, depression, and so on. And then let's say that missing parent or a step-parent comes in and finds a child in that place. They then try to push them back down again, which creates a marital conflict. And we see divorce not because there was a bad relationship, but created by the circumstance of absence and a natural replacement. So it's just, a lot of the tools that we've developed are looking at what are the patterns in healthy, normal families, and how do we look at this in terms of prevention when a spouse or a partner is missing. What do we do to prevent the long-term consequences? And this is often one of the things that we will get in therapy. We'll get a couple coming in, married or not, but just a couple coming in with conflict that they're not aware is based on repeated absences. And those absences need not be physical absences. It can be migraines, it can be depression, it can be anxiety, it can be asthma, diabetes, any of the illnesses that create temporary absences repeatedly. There's thoughts from any of you? Okay, our next session is going to be practical plans to apply to your own practice and or program. So hope to see you back at noon, and we go noon to 1 for those of you who choose to join us.